Join me as I dive into the harrowing true stories of World War I soldiers and attempt to uncover the most chilling accounts from the front lines. In this video, you'll explore the life of World War I soldiers living in the trenches, a defining aspect of the Great War that shaped their experiences and the course of history. It's a story often overlooked, yet it's essential to understanding the sacrifices made by those who fought. The trenches were a place of mud, blood, and tears, where soldiers lived in constant fear of death. But it's also a story of camaraderie, resilience, and the human spirit's ability to endure. In the trenches, soldiers experienced things that no human should ever have to go through. They lived in squalid conditions, surrounded by death, and faced the constant threat of enemy attacks. It's a miracle that anyone survived, yet many did, and their stories are a testament to the strength of the human spirit. As we explore this aspect of World War I, we'll delve into the daily lives of soldiers, the psychological impact of trench life, and the strategies they used to survive. We'll also examine the harsh realities they faced, including poor sanitation, limited food supply, and the constant danger of enemy fire. It's a story that will leave you in awe of the soldiers' bravery and sacrifices. From the moment they arrived in the trenches, soldiers knew they were in for a fight for survival. The conditions were brutal, and the rules of war seemed to have been forgotten. But despite it all, soldiers found ways to cope, to survive, and to keep their humanity intact. It's a story that will haunt you long after this video ends. Highlight the harsh realities soldiers faced in the trenches, including poor sanitation, limited food supply, and constant danger from enemy attacks. Life in the trenches was a never-ending nightmare. Soldiers lived in mud-filled ditches, surrounded by the stench of death and decay. Rats, lice, and fleas were their constant companions, and the smell of human waste hung heavy in the air. Water was always in short supply, and soldiers often had to drink from stagnant pools or muddy rivers. The result was a constant stream of waterborne diseases, which weakened their bodies and spirits. Food was also scarce, and soldiers often went hungry for days on end. The lucky ones received bullets and biscuits. The unlucky ones got nothing. Soldiers in the trenches were constantly on edge, waiting for the next attack. The sound of artillery fire was ever present, and the ground shook beneath their feet as shells exploded all around them. Death lurked around every corner, and soldiers knew it. They saw their friends, their brothers, and their comrades fall around them, and they knew they could be next. The psychological toll of trench life was immense. Soldiers suffered from what would later be called shell shock, a condition that left them unable to cope with the stresses of war. They became withdrawn, isolated, and numb, unable to express the emotions that churned inside them. The trauma of war would stay with them for the rest of their lives. Soldiers turned to each other for support, forming bonds that would last a lifetime. They shared what little food they had, told stories, and laughed together. They found ways to occupy their minds, from writing letters to loved ones to playing makeshift games in the trenches. It was a sense of camaraderie that kept them going, a sense of belonging in a world that had lost its way. In the midst of all this chaos, soldiers found ways to survive. They scavenged what they could from the battlefield, using old helmets as makeshift pots and pans. They turned ration packs into games, using the cardboard to create puzzles and challenges. They even managed to find a sense of humor, cracking jokes and playing pranks on each other. Delve deeper into daily routines, the psychological impact of trench life, and the camaraderie formed among soldiers, as well as the strategies they used to survive. One of the most striking aspects of trench life was the daily routine. Soldiers would wake up at dawn, stand to for an hour, and then settle in for the day. They'd spend hours on sentry duty, watching for enemy movements and reporting back to headquarters. The rest of the day would be spent on maintenance tasks, from cleaning rifles to repairing trenches. Soldiers would also spend time writing letters, a vital link to the outside world. These letters were often censored, but they gave soldiers a chance to express themselves, to share their hopes and fears with loved ones back home. Soldiers would also spend hours on patrol, creeping through no man's land, searching for enemy positions and avoiding deadly traps. It was a game of cat and mouse, where one wrong move could mean death. But despite the dangers, soldiers continued to patrol, driven by a sense of duty and loyalty to their comrades. The psychological impact of trench life was immense. Soldiers were trapped in a never-ending cycle of fear, anxiety, and despair. They saw their friends die, they saw their comrades fall, and they knew they could be next. The trauma of war would stay with them for the rest of their lives, haunting their dreams and shaping their memories. But despite it all, soldiers found ways to cope. They turned to each other, forming bonds that would last a lifetime. They found ways to occupy their minds, from writing letters to playing makeshift games in the trenches. They even managed to find a sense of humor, cracking jokes and playing pranks on each other. One of the most powerful stories to come out of the trenches is that of Private Alfred Anderson, a Scottish soldier who served on the Western Front. Anderson's story is one of survival, of resilience, and of the human spirit's ability to endure. Anderson was sent to the front lines in 1916, just as the Battle of the Somme was raging. He was just 19 years old, but he was about to experience the horrors of war firsthand. Anderson's unit was stationed in a muddy, cramped trench, surrounded by the stench of death and decay. The air was thick with the smell of human waste, and the sound of artillery fire was ever present. Despite the chaos around him, Anderson found ways to cope. He turned to his comrades, forming bonds that would last a lifetime. He wrote letters to his family, sharing his hopes and fears with them. And he found ways to occupy his mind, from reading books to playing makeshift games in the trenches. Anderson's story is a testament to the power of the human spirit. He survived the trenches, he survived the war, and he went on to live a long, fulfilling life. His story is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, always a way to survive, and always a way to thrive. Trench life was more than just a battlefield. It was a daily struggle, sometimes against the enemy, sometimes against hunger, and sometimes against one's own resilience. As we reflect on the experiences of World War I soldiers in the trenches, we're reminded of the human spirit's ability to endure. Despite the horrors of war, despite the chaos and destruction, soldiers found ways to survive, to cope, and to keep their humanity intact. The trench experience was a defining aspect of World War I, shaping the way soldiers fought, the way they lived, and the way they died. It's a lesson that has been learned and relearned throughout history, from the trenches of World War I to the battlefields of modern warfare. As we remember the sacrifices made by World War I soldiers, we're reminded of the importance of understanding the human cost of war. We're reminded of the need to honor the memories of those who fought, to learn from their experiences, and to strive for a world where such sacrifices are never needed again. Trench warfare wasn't just a military strategy. It became a harsh reality for every soldier who lived through it. What are your thoughts on this kind of warfare? Thanks for watching, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on trench warfare in the comments below. What do you think is the most fascinating aspect of trench life? Do you have any family members who served in the trenches during World War I? Let me know, and I'll do my best to respond. And if you have any suggestions for future historical topics, I'd love to hear them.